Good afternoon. Welcome to Five on Friday. My name is Megan Daly, for those of you who don't know me. And I kind of blog, I guess, at Children's Books Daily, where I review all of my favourite books, both on the blog as written reviews and here on Facebook Live on Friday, where I talk about my 5 favourite books of the week and what they've been. I've got a really nice selection this afternoon of ones which are either brand new or have been out for not too long at all, and they range in age from sort of early childhood up to upper primary. I don't have any young adult ones today because I've been a little bit behind with my young adult reading. I think over the holidays, I read a couple of adult books for a change, and I normally read young adult books in the school holidays, and these holidays I chose to read a few adult books, so I'm a little bit behind in my young adult reading, so I probably need some suggestions from my dear friend Trish Buckley of what I need to be reading in YA at the moment. So I will dive straight in. Literally, I didn't even mean to kind of make a joke then about I'll dive straight into the surf. I will talk first about Trouble in the Surf, which is by Stephanie Owen Reeder and Bryony Stewart. Stephanie Owen Reeder is an award-winning, fabulous author. She writes stacks and stacks of books for the National Library of Australia, who published this one. And Bryony Stewart is one of my favourite illustrators. I love following her on Instagram. And she's probably... I was going to say she's probably most well known for her Kamuko series with UQP, but look, all of her picture books are absolutely gorgeous. I really enjoy them all. So they've teamed up with this one, and I'm going to take you through it and show you something that I really love about National Library of Australia books. I always highly recommend their books, and I did have a stint, quite a long stint, being on their publications committee, which I super duper enjoyed. I just haven't had time of late to be involved, but I really love what they do. So Trouble in the Surf has got kind of 3 arms to it, I guess, in a sense that it's a book about Charles Kingsford Smith, of all people, and the Bondi Surf Bathers Lifesaving Club and their very beginnings, and Surf Lifesaving Australia. So it's really touching on a few fairly famous organisations right there, and I think it just is going to have so many applications in schools, but it's also, because it is so utterly beautiful, it is very giftable, and this is absolutely the sort of book I would give to overseas visiting friends or anybody interested in surf lifesaving culture in Australia. Now, I have to start with those end papers. How exquisite are these end papers? And for those of you who know me well, you will know that when I'm an adult, I'm going to have an end paper art gallery, and oh gosh, these ones would absolutely be in there in my imaginary end paper art gallery. I just think they're exquisite. They say so much about this story, about flight and about seagulls and about the ocean. They are just exquisite. Well done, Bryony Stewart. They are some of the best end papers I have seen this year. It starts with a historical story. I think it's set in, it does say, travel back in time to 1907. So we're in 1907, and Charlie Smith and Rupert Swallow are cousins, and they go, they're really desperate to go to the surf for a swim, and they ask their mum if they can go to Bondi for a swim. They catch the tram to Bondi, and they do indeed go for a swim. I love that you get to see a good, it's some great images of the period of time in the costumes, bathing costumes they would have been wearing. And there they are, just totally enjoying the surf and having a fabulous time floating on their backs. But then they get caught in a rip, as can happen. And this is a really clever page here. It shows kind of what not to do in a rip. They try to swim, what is it you're not meant to do? I try to swim against the rip, and they're taken further and further out. And when Charlie starts to sink and just is so tired, he can't do anything but think about the fact that he's just going to have to sink. His cousin calls for help, and he is spotted from the beach, and they send out what was then a very early version of surf lifesavers with a rope, and they tow him back in. And then a nurse who's off duty on the beach has to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and at last Charlie coughs and his eyes flutter open, and the nurse collapses down on the ground beside him, and then the local police officer takes him home, and all is well. But Mum does say, "Don't ever scare me like that again, Charles Kingsford Smith," which is the first time we know that this is Charles Kingsford Smith. How amazing is that? I didn't actually know that. Probably not many people did, that he actually had an incident in the surf as a child where he could have died, and we may never have had the famous aviator that we all know as Charles Kingsford Smith. I like this little bit of visual literacy here. The illustrator has put in the, what is it, the Morning Herald, I guess the Sydney Morning Herald, and it's got a picture of an aeroplane on the front cover. It's in his back pocket. I thought that was really lovely. A nice nod to what was going to become his future. So then it talks about what happens next. And it was based on the true story of 9-year-old cousins, Charlie Smith and Rupert Swallow, in 1907. And then they talk about how Charlie and Rupert enlisted in the Australian Army and they served overseas during World War One. It then talks about how Charlie didn't, in fact, stay out of trouble like his mother asked him to. He got into a fair bit of trouble fighting in Gallipoli and flying as well. He was also injured during this time. And then it talks about his life as an aviator, and unfortunately, it says, unfortunately, sea got Charlie in the end. His plane went down over the Indian Ocean in 1935 and he was never seen again. It talks a little bit about the nurse who saved him, and it also talks about Surf Life Saving Australia. Now, the lovely thing about National Library of Australia publications is they always include some resources from their collection. So these are photos from the National Library of Australia. And it has a bit of information about safety in the surf, and it has some information about the Bondi Surf Bathers Life-Saving Club. And somewhere in the book it talked about the fact that he was perhaps the first person that the Bondi Surf Bathers Life-Saving Club actually saved. It's got a glossary, as all good non-fiction books should have, and then it's got some links, want to know more. This, to me, is everything I want, and acknowledgements for illustrations. This is everything I want in a non-fiction book. It is engaging, it's very beautiful, it has a glossary, it's got more information at the back with links. It's just fantastic. I just, you know, I love all National Library of Australia publications, but this is one of my favourite of 2019. I can't recommend it highly enough for, oh gosh, I was going to say an early childhood audience. You could read this from grade 2, I think, right up until, you know, look, I really enjoyed it, and I'm 40 grade. I'm saying from 7 to 70. Probably my 90-year-old grandmother would also enjoy it. It's ageless. It's fantastic. All right, speaking of ageless and, like, always wonderful, hello, Graham Base. I mean, gosh, what is there to say about Graham Base? I have loved Graham Base since I was a child. Like many of you who are watching now, I pored over Animalia, and when I had my first ever classroom, I taught year 2 out at Westmoreton Anglican College. Still hold a very soft spot for those little people. And my first classroom had an alphabet frieze of the Animalia book, and I guess it was my nod to my first ever author illustrator crush, Graham Base. Animalia and then all of those books that followed just blew my mind. They showed me, and I think the whole world, what a picture book could be, and the level of visual literacy that you could imbue into a picture book. Oh, look, his books are quite dark in both the illustration style. The actual illustrations are quite dark, and the themes are often quite dark. In one of his books, you know, the main character actually dies, and he often talks about climate change in his books and other environmental issues. He talks about some tough subject matter, but for some reason, I don't know, it's just perfect. The man is a genius, and I met him, I think 2 years ago. I've met him a number of times, but I actually met him in person and spoke with him on a panel at the Somerset Story Fest 2 years ago. I was so nervous to meet him because I was so worried I was going to gush, or that I would clam up and wouldn't know what to say. And if any of my friends are watching, you are now laughing because I don't really lose my words ever. When I'm nervous, I tend to say really dumb things. And I was very, very nervous that I was going to say something utterly stupid in front of Graham Base. But I actually had a fantastic time on a panel with him and Jane Caro, who I'm also in awe of, and Solly Raphael. I think we actually did a really great panel. And then I had dinner with Graham Base and his wife and author Kim Kane and Jane Caro afterwards. And we shared a bottle of red, and it was lovely. And I got over my ridiculous nerves, and he was just an absolute delight, as was his wife. It's so nice when you meet one of your heroes and they are as delightful as you had hoped. Anyway, Moonfish is his latest book. I suspect it's out this week, or maybe it's not even out until next week. Now, I believe Graham's been doing quite a bit of travel in China over the last few years because his books have done very well in China and have been translated into Chinese and have certainly been published in China and are very popular there. So you can very much see that this has been inspired by his travels in China. It is a fable. It's basically the story of the ugly duckling retold Graham Base style. It is about a fish, Moonfish, who lives under the ocean, obviously because he is a fish. I don't know why I said that. But he had been found by an old couple. He was orphaned and he was raised by an older couple, but he was quite bullied at school because he was different. So there's lots of stuff about difference and acceptance and family and found family. And Moonfish kept on growing and growing and growing, and he didn't feel like he fitted in. Anyway, it turns out that Moonfish was destined for greater things, as was the ugly duckling. And it's this really beautiful story of dreaming that, you know, about your future and of what you could become and becoming better than what you could have imagined. And Moonfish, in the end, he saves the day. It's a beautiful lyrical fable about the dragon moon, and it's gorgeous. Now, what I really like about the illustrations, I said that he was inspired by his time traveling in China. I feel like what Graham Base has done, and I could be wrong, is that he's taken the countryside of China and scenes that you might see in China, and he's put them underwater. It's like he's either flooded China or he's just turned it upside down and he's put it all underwater. There's some fabulous wordless double-page spreads which have got these scenes of the Great Wall of China. And look at that one. That's probably my favourite double-page spread. I love the purple sunsets in this scene. And I love this frog as well, this wise frog. Look at that. They're just the most exquisite double-page spreads, which are entirely wordless, but you spend more time on those pages than you do on the pages with text. So in my mind, he's taken inspiration from the Chinese countryside and urban environments. He's put them underwater and he's, you know, built up his characters around those. It's very, very beautiful. It's typically Graham Base. It's, as I said earlier, it's dark, it's very, very detailed, it's multi-layered. There's lots of fabulous visual literacy features to explore with young readers. And like all of his books, it will be enjoyed by, you know, young readers as much as it will by the adult readers that are reading it with them. And you can read his books over and over and over again. I know Chippy and I have read this book twice this week, and I probably read it another 3 times without her, just sort of exploring it. It's just exquisite. I just love it. I really love that you can tell a Graham Base book that his work is so distinctive that you can just recognise it instantly. Oh my gosh, I'm doing all the legends this afternoon. Hello, Alison Lester. Gosh, Running with the Horses as a picture book was published 10 years ago. And it has now come out not as a picture book, but as a short chapter book. You know, it's just very short little sort of a cross between a picture book and a chapter book. It's very, very giftable. Now, this one is set before World War II began. And it is about Nina, who lives with her father above the palace stables at the Royal Academy of the Dancing Horses. Her mother has passed away and she's been raised by her father who trains these and looks after these dancing horses. She loves watching the famous white stallions, but her favourite horse is the mare Zelda, who is the cab horse. World War II then begins, and Nina's world changes, you know, very dramatically. And she and her father have to leave the city and journey over the mountains, and they take with them the horses from this very famous Royal Academy of Dancing Horses, but they also take with them Zelda. Now, what is really fabulous about this book, for starters, look at those end papers. It's got, I don't know if they're illustrations by the masters. I'm not sure, I should have looked at that first, but they're beautiful end papers. Should have Googled that. It's just gorgeous. What I really love is that Alison Lester and presumably her publishers and the designers that worked on this book they basically taken apart the original picture book, Running with the Horses. This was the cover of the picture book, and they have put it into different chapters, but they have still included all of the illustrations. The illustrations break up the text, so we've got pages of text, and then we've got pages with the original illustrations from the book. I didn't compare it to my picture book, I should have, but I'm almost 100% sure that all of the illustrations from the original picture book are included in this book. I didn't notice any that were missing in particular. I adored this picture book when it came out, but I have to say, gosh, it's a tough picture book to read. You know, it's not really aimed at very young children. And I have to say that when I saw this a few weeks ago, I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Because to me, I've got an 11-year-old, and I actually think my 11-year-old is far better placed to read this book than my 7-year-old is. And I am forever encouraging my grade 6 students to borrow picture books, and they do borrow picture books, and there's so many picture books for older readers. But, you know, to have it in this smaller format, like a small chapter book, I think is going to make it accessible for a whole new generation of young readers. And, you know, it's just, I'm so very pleased that they did it. I almost prefer this smaller version than I do the picture book version. And I've only really thought about that now as I'm speaking about it, but I just adored it. It does at the end have an author's note. It's got an about the author, and it's also got an author's note. And it says, this story is a work of fiction inspired by the rescue of the stallions from the Spanish riding school in Vienna during the Second World War. And she does say down the bottom that she hopes that a whole new generations of readers will treasure the story of Nina and her father and the courageous old horse who saved them. It's exquisite. It's really giftable. It's a gorgeous little edition. Puffin have done a fabulous job with it. And yeah, highly giftable. Really recommend it if you want to add that one to your, dare I say, Christmas shopping list. Oh. All right, Change of Pace, Squidge Dibley by Mick Elliott. Oh my gosh, I love this series. It's going to be, I think there's going to be 5 in this series. And this is the first one, Squidge Dibley Destroys the School. Now, some of you may have seen on Facebook and Instagram a couple of weeks ago that I was having a really rough time, and I must have said something on social media, and Mick Elliott did this gorgeous illustration of Squidge Dibley next to me, and it's actually now I can't really show you that, it's actually now my background on my iWatch, which I love looking at every time I look at the time. It's beautiful. I love the work of Mick Elliott. He worked for Nickelodeon for a really long time. In fact, I'm going to turn to his author's page so I can show you his photo. Can I also say, you see how dodgy this, look at that. I'm a librarian. Look at what happened to this book. So in this book, the school pool features a lot, and I'm going to claim that Squidge Dibley kind of had a hand in throwing this book into the school pool. Actually, what happened was the book fell into the kitchen sink because I was reading it while I was making dinner one night. It's really hard to cook and read. It's not recommended. It fell into the sink. I actually think it's probably not going to survive. It's actually dry now, but it smells a little bit. Anyway, so anyway, I have destroyed a book, which I feel really bad about, but it's also kind of funny that it was Squidge Dibley because I think he'd approve. Anyway, Mick Elliott got into heaps of trouble for drawing disgusting pictures in class at school. Now he gets to write and draw hilarious stories as a real job, which makes up for the fact that he's all old and wrinkly. I love that. For most of his grown-up life, Mick worked as a TV producer at Nickelodeon, and he goes on to talk about his work there and his other series, which is The Turners. So Squidge Dibley is for readers about 7 to 10 who've enjoyed things like Dogman and Weirdo and Funny Kid. It's very highly illustrated, and Mick is the author and the illustrator. I'm so sorry, Mick, about destroying your beautiful book. I feel really bad. It's not my signed copy. Anyway, this is Squidge Dibley, and we meet him in chapter 1, and then we don't see him again until chapter 23, which I think is really interesting. It's about a grade 6 class at, where is it on the back cover? Craigland South Primary School. And they're really, really naughty. And they're churning through, actually, that's unfair. They're not naughty. They're just a disparate group of children with individual needs and very strong personalities. And when combined together, they make for a fairly tricky class to teach. I have had classes like that over the years. Sometimes as a teacher, you just look at some classes and individually the children are completely delightful, but somehow together they just kind of are like this explosion. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, individually, all of the children in this grade 6 class are delightful, but together they are a bit tricky, and they are churning through teachers so much so that they end up with this incredibly strict teacher who basically doesn't let them say boo. And in fact, they don't really say boo. In fact, they fart a lot and they burp a lot and they make all these ridiculous noises that are a bit gross. And the book does say on the back that it's too gross for grown-ups. And definitely, if you are squeamish, or if you do not like toilet humour, or if you do not like the funny books, i.e. if you do not like to laugh, probably do not read Squidge Dibley. Do you know what? It's not aimed at you and I. It is not aimed at me as a 43-year-old reader. It is aimed at my 7-year-old. Now, my 7-year-old is a voracious reader, and she laughed out loud in this book. This book is, I think, squarely aimed at reluctant young readers between 7 and 10 who want to be grossed out and who want to laugh. Kids laugh a lot. We forget how to laugh as grown-ups, and life gets very, very serious. Often, I see on social media people bemoaning the funny books or the toilet humour books. These books are a gateway into other great literature, and your child is not going to move from Squidge Dibley to War and Peace overnight, but your child is never going to get to War and Peace unless they've discovered things like Squidge Dibley first. I've never read War and Peace, and I don't intend reading War and Peace, but I bring it up all the time now because my 12-year-old niece is completely obsessed with reading War and Peace. I don't even know why she wants to read it, but I keep trying to talk her out of it. But, you know, you've got to read these books. You've got to engage and enjoy literature and be playful with it and laugh while you're reading. And books like Squidge Dibley just, I think, are the heart and soul of school libraries and of what we need for our young people. So thank you, Mick Elliott. It's a really great story about this grade 6 class and how they end up with this pretty awful, power-hungry teacher who doesn't let them do anything. And then Squidge Dibley in chapter 23 arrives, and Squidge Dibley has got this elastic body. His limbs can stretch and he can blow up, and depending on what's happening around him. And he also has some conditions. I think I've highlighted one of the conditions here. To whom it may concern, this is a note. Squidge Dibley suffers from a rare medical condition known as nervous belly belches. Exposure to some loud noises such as shouting, yelling, or angry outbursts will cause Squidge Dibley's stomach to violently expel a surge of sulfuric stomach gases in the form of explosive burps and belches, big ones. As there is no cure for nervous belly belches, please do not shout or yell anywhere near Squidge Dibley. Yours sincerely, Dr. Marcus Walrus, Craiglands Institute of Burp Studies. There's a few letters like that throughout the book about Squidge. Oh gosh, Squidge is a fabulous character. He's just, you know, you're really going to love him if you're a kid, and some adults will really love him as well. And if you don't love squidge, that's okay. You don't have to, because you will love the fact that your kids are reading a book which won't end up looking like my copy, which fell in the kitchen sink. I am so sorry about that. Anyway, my final book that I want to talk to you about this afternoon is one I have been waiting for ages. And I'm going to have to admit that I haven't finished it yet, so I'm not entirely sure what happens in the ending. Not that I would give a spoiler anyway. This is the third in a fabulous series written by Katrina Nainstad. I don't know if that's how you say your name. I'm so sorry, Katrina. And illustrated by Cheryl Orsini. Now, I love the illustrations of Cheryl Orsini. She's one of my favourite illustrators in Australia, and she's a perfect fit for the covers. She's done the covers of all of these books. There is 3 in the series. There was The Girl, the Dog and the Writer in Rome, The Girl, the Dog and the Writer in Provence, and The Girl, the Dog and the Writer in Lucerne. So she's done the covers. They've got a map in them by Cheryl Orsini, and then each chapter starts with a teeny weeny little illustration as well. So they are beautifully, they're just a gorgeous, again, I think quite giftable book. They're quite a thick book, and I think they're aimed at readers from, you could certainly read this from 9, but I think they're best suited for readers 10, 11, 12, 13-ish. The first one starts with the young Freya, who is the main character in all 3 of the books. And Freya and her mum, Clementine, have basically spent the first 10 years of Freya's life travelling around the Arctic looking at animals. Her mother's some sort of, I don't know, scientist, I can't remember. That was 2 books ago, nearly 3 books ago. In the first book, Freya's mother, Clementine, becomes unwell and she has to go away. And they don't have a lot of family, so she sends Freya to her very dear friend, whose name I've completely forgotten, Tobias. He's divine, so quirky and divine. She sends him to Tobias to live, and Tobias and Freya don't know each other, and they have to sort of form this awkward at first friendship. Tobias is a writer. He's used to spending most of his time by himself and with his beautiful dog. And basically they end up travelling first through Rome and then through Provence and now through Lucerne. These are mysteries. Each of the stories has a mystery to be solved in them. They are absolutely full to the brim of quirky characters. It is about the delight of found families, and you know, not all of us were lucky enough, like I was, actually, I have a beautiful family, but not all of us are lucky enough to feel that our family are our best supporters. And in this series, it celebrates those friends who become like family. And it's just, you just meet the most beautiful characters. You learn a lot about each country. I feel like they're very suitable for readers who've loved things like Clementine Rose and Alice Miranda from Jacqueline Harvey. They're probably a little bit of a step up literacy-wise from those books. They're just completely delightful and I really adore them. And if you are looking for some really great maybe summer holiday reads for your grade 5 or 6 or grade 7 children, then I would highly recommend getting this series for them, all 3 of them, and they will zoom through them and deeply love falling into these beautiful stories. So in this one anyway, Freya and her mother are reunited at the start, and Tobias and Vivi, who we met in the last book, are in love and they've moved to Lucerne, and everything seems really perfect until this, you know, mystery happens. And, you know, it's a gorgeous mystery to be solved. Nothing dreadful happens. It's probably a little bit Midsummer Murders, but, you know, they're just delightful. I cannot recommend these books highly enough. They're just an absolute delight. They're heartwarming and they're nourishing for the soul. They're just beautiful. I really, really love them. So that's all I have to talk to you about today. It is raining here in Brisbane and I am overjoyed. I hope the rain is reaching our farmers. I really, really, really do. I hope that it pours all weekend because, oh my gosh, we need it. You know, my garden needs it, but my garden is nothing compared to the farmers who need it. So I really hope some of this rain is reaching them. I hope that you have a great weekend and that whatever you've got on and however busy you are, that you find some time to sit down with a really good book and have a bit of a read of it. What have I got to read this weekend? I've got a few things to read. Oh, I'm going to read The Second Corner Park Clubhouse by one of my favourites, Davina Bell, this weekend, hopefully. And I'm also going to reread some of the books for the Story Arts Festival next week. So I've got over there Damazi and the Big Yellow Line, which I'm going to reread by Belanga Koza and Matt Otley, because the Story Arts Festival is on all next week. And if you are within driving distance of Ipswich, I would highly recommend checking out Family Program in the afternoons. I'm speaking on Monday evening at Ipswich Girls Grammar with my divine publisher, Christina Schulz. She's going to interview me about my book and about how to keep your children reading. And then there's this fabulous family program on each afternoon. Pete Carnivus and I are doing a mindfulness session. I'm talking at Springfield Library on Thursday morning to Mums with Mums, and I'm off on Thursday evening to see Belanga Koza perform Damazi and the Big Yellow Lion. I'm very excited about that. And my entire primary school are also all travelling out to Ipswich every day next week to see different authors. Anyway, have a great weekend. I will finish up there.